Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. Today, the 12th day of the month of Menachem Av, the Consoling Father, 5776. It's Tuesday, the 16th of August, 2016, the Shabbat, Parshat Ve'etchanan. I implored Hashem at that time, and it's also called Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of consolation, called so on account of the Haftarah, the prophetic reading that we will be reading in the book of Isaiah, that begins with the words, it's in Isaiah chapter 40, comfort, comfort my people, says your God. So we are past the 9th of Av, which was observed this past Sunday on the 10th of Av because of the deferred Shabbat, the deferred fast of Shabbat. And Tisha B'Av itself was observed by many hundreds of Jews. In fact, I think it's being called an all-time record of Jews who came to ascend the Temple Mount in purity on the 9th of Av. I believe it was 400 Jews all told. There were many others that were turned away. There were many others that were not able to go. There were also a number of Jews that were arrested. There was one in particular that was arrested for the severe crime of crying. This poor Jew was not able to restrain himself from his emotion, which is a crime for a Jew on the Temple Mount. And also, the visits to the Temple Mount on the 9th of Av were curtailed at one point, cut short because of violence, premeditated mob violence on the Temple Mount that was, of course, perpetrated by the Muslims. But the fact is, the whole situation has changed in Israel over the past few years. Yitzchak and I have been musing, have had occasion and reason to contemplate the fact that we have been working for a very, very long time at our goal of advancing temple consciousness here in the Temple Institute. And it's changed. The dynamic has changed. There are people that go to the Western Wall, and there are people that go to the Temple Mount, and there are more and more and more people that go to the Temple Mount and say, this is the real thing, this is what it's all about. And it is a phenomena that is being dealt with, that is being addressed, that is being spoken about and not ignored all across Israel and in all the forums and in every media outlet. This is here to stay. Temple Mount consciousness, Holy Temple consciousness, which of course comes to a climax on the 9th of Av, and people write, should we be observing it? Shouldn't we be observing it? Does it mean anything to us? Does it mean anything to us? And it is very, very much an evolving reality whose time has come, obviously, after almost 50 years of the unification of Jerusalem, with this open wound on our hearts, the fact that the Temple Mount is off limits to Jewish prayer. It is basically just barely allowed for Jews to visit there, begrudgingly, unwelcomely, being treated like a fifth column by our own government, being treated like unequal citizens and unwelcome guests. And lately there have been some expressions of more hardline desire to express our sovereignty over the Temple Mount that have been espoused by various people in the government, and the police lately, much to their praise, have been cracking down on Muslim illegal activity and attacks against the Jews. And this reality of basically our taking a posture of self-defense, or at least like trying to proclaim what's ours is ours, is being met by tremendous castigation, opposition, and inflammatory rhetoric by Jordan. Jordan is accusing Israel of all sorts of things. Jordan, of course, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, accusing Israel of invading the mosque, of all sorts of things. Egypt today, our other ally, chimed in and expressed tremendous angst, consternation at Israel's what do they call it there? invasion of Al-Aqsa.
The violation of all the rules.
Violation of all the rules, right? In other words, Jews are not allowed to pray. That rule, which is totally against every principle upon which the State of Israel was founded, and which is against every principle of basic human rights, that rule is not being violated. That rule is being upheld, and in fact, Israel's treatment of visitors to the Temple Mount is totally in favor of the Muslims. And yet, the Arab nations, even those that are supposedly friendly with us, are constantly blaming Israel and attacking Israel for violating all the rules. It's all very, very strange.
I'd just like to add that one of the reasons, technical reasons, why there were so many Jews in the Temple Mount this Sunday on Tisha B'Av was that the police allowed for the first time in over a year and a half more than one group of Jews to be on the Mount at a time. Meaning, for the past year and a half, the police would allow 15 people up, 20 people maybe, and then until they stepped down from the Temple Mount, 45 minutes to an hour later, they would not let the second group but go up. This Sunday, they allowed more than one group up at the same time, which is why they were able to facilitate such a, quote, large number in the short hours that Jews were allowed at all in the Temple Mount, and even those hours were curtailed because of the violence. So if you're ever wondering, they say the numbers are growing and more people, but today there was 50, yesterday there was 70, tomorrow there's 100, and now 400, that's such a big number, which is really not such a big number. The reason it's a big number, or the reason I should say it's such a small number, is because the hours that the Jews are allowed at all to go up are so limited. They're about 3 hours each day. And like I said, until 2 days ago, more than one group of Jews was not allowed to go up at a time. Each group is limited in number. There are so many limitations placed upon Jewish presence that it's a struggle just to get anybody up there each day. And certainly if the hours were, the limited hours were rescinded and Jews could go up freely throughout the day, any hour of the day, there would be thousands of Jews, because the hours they make it practically impossible. Practically impossible.
And again, you and I have been discussing for years, on whose desk is this? Whose responsibility? Where does the buck stop? Is this about the Israel police, or is this about the Prime Minister of Israel? And the Prime Minister of Israel, as we know, the portfolio of the Temple Mount rests squarely on his desk. He was approached by a number of Knesset members on the eve of Tisha B'Av who expressed their desire to ascend the Mount, and he did not allow them. He does not allow Knesset members. He makes the rules. The Israel police, kudos to them, or should they be vilified? By us, at least, who want to tell the truth. Yitzchak, are we praising them for allowing, for the first time in a long time, groups of Jews to be able to mill about there simultaneously? Or are we vilifying them for arresting a poor, innocent, emotional Jew who dared to cry on the Temple Mount as an expression of his feelings about being there and about Tisha B'Av? So vilified or kudos? I'm the wrong person to ask, because sadly I was not able to go to the Temple Mount this year for Tisha B'Av, and I haven't been able to go up for many months because I am still banned by the Israel police because of my crime that I perpetrated there. And I don't know when that's going to be resolved or how, and it's very, very terrible, gut-wrenching open wound in the middle of my heart that I have not been able to go to the Temple Mount. So don't ask me to praise the Israel police for their determination that I am a threat to public order.
I wasn't asking anybody to praise anybody.
But I'm just asking, as we're monitoring the situation.
You know what? The situation's getting better and it's getting worse.
Exactly. It's some kind of...
And on the one hand, I have high regard for Gilad Erdan, who's the Minister of Internal Security here, because I think he has made an effort to be more accommodating. And I think he actually, if he were the Prime Minister, at least, by the positions that he holds right now, he would I mean, he's already, in the past, he has declared that the Jews should be allowed to pray in the Temple Mount. But, unfortunately, there's always a lot of politics, internal politics, who knows what. But it's the best of times, the worst of times. Yes, more and more Jews are going up, more and more Jews are discussing it, and the numbers are growing. And but this thing that you read all the time, and it just makes me so angry, Rabbi. That you read articles, and you can read all the reports and all the different outlets today about what Jordan has to say and what Egypt had to say. They'll say that they claim there's a violation in the status quo that Israel imposed in 1967 after it liberated the Temple Mount. Israel didn't impose any status quo in 1967 that forbid Jewish prayer in the Temple Mount. This has been an evolving and deteriorating situation that really became a complete, heavily.
It's a fabrication.
It's a what I mean, it's been under Netanyahu that it has become enforced that any Jew that opens his mouth and says a word of prayer or maybe prayer is taken off. This is Netanyahu's new twist and his version of what he calls a status quo, but it never was a status quo.
It never was accepted. It's not legal in any sense. I would call it a paralegal arrangement, but I need to take the word legal out of that hyphenation because it has no bearing whatsoever in law, and it's always referred to in the media as that prayer is forbidden and that the people who pray there are breaking the law, and it simply isn't true. You said something interesting prophetically a moment ago, Yitzchak. You said it's the best of times and the worst of times, taking your quote from
Charles Dickens.
The great Charles Dickens, one of Yitzchak's favorites. The fact is, this month of Av really is, in a way, the most beautiful example of the best of times and the worst of times. Tisha B'Av is behind us, and in a way, there's something holiday-like about it. It has some odd and interesting anomalies. It's a special day, and after all, the fact is, everything that happens is for the best, and Hashem is calling His people back to Him, and the temple needs to be rebuilt, and that's our responsibility, not God's. The sages tell us that Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. Is that a metaphor? Is it literal? Is it a symbol of the most beautiful idea of that from the very depths of tragedy, hope is born, and that from the belly, the maw of despair, hope rises up? Well, personally, I know that of a little baby boy that was born on Tisha B'Av next door to my daughter's house, so hold on to your hats. He might be the one, I don't know. But in any event, this month of Av, after all, Av means father. And the real name of the month, Menachem Av, means the consoling father, the comforting father. And nowhere is this idea seen, this turnabout, this dichotomy, this dual idea of what, and this is, of course, the life experience. Nowhere is it seen as blatantly as in this week. Because in the midst of this month of Av, with all of its turmoil and travail, the destruction of the temple, we have now this week a holiday, a festival, an unsung holiday, which is very, very holy, but it lacks a lot of its significance without the holy temple. And of course I refer to the 15th of the month of Av, which actually occurs this week on Friday, beginning Thursday night. And the 15th of Av is a day of tremendous rejoicing and gladness. And our sages teach in Tractate Ta'anit that in the time of the Holy Temple, frankly, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and Tu BAv, the 15th day of the month of Av, are the happiest days for the Jewish people. And on the 15th day of Av, and on Yom Kippur, the daughters of Jerusalem would dress up in white gowns and dance in the vineyards. And Tu BAv, the 15th day of Av, has become associated with romance in modern Israel, matrimony. And the reason for that is because on the 15th day of Av, unmarried fellows would go and look at those girls dancing in the vineyards and choose their brides. And there are a number of reasons for this, and there are a number of events that occurred on the 15th day of Av throughout history. I don't have the tractate in front of me now, but there are actually 6 things that happened on that day, and they're all amazing. One of them, for example, is that that's the day in history when the original decree was given on those members of the generation of the desert that would perish and not go into the land. They stopped dying eventually in the last year on the 15th day of Av. There are many things that happen on that day. As I said, 6 things. That's the day that the martyrs of Beitar that had been slain by the Romans and whose bodies were not allowed to be buried for over 2 years, they were finally allowed to be buried on that day. There were a number of things that happened. It's very amazing, and in past years I've discussed it in detail, but the fact is there's something about that day which bespeaks an intimacy, a beautiful love relationship between Hashem and his people. And in fact, that's the day that the tribe of Benjamin, after it had been ostracized, was permitted to re-enter into the ranks of Israel and marry with the other tribes, as well as in general the day that after the tribal portions were divvied out in the land, that the tribes were able to marry into each other, because the edict of the daughters of Tzlafchad was only for that generation in terms of marrying only within its own tribe. The point is two of these aspects of the 6 things that happen on Tu BAv are matrimony related, but that's not the point. The point is the reason that this day has become associated with love and marriage is because it is the ultimate expression of the true nature of the relationship between God and his people. For many reasons. It's a very, very special day, and nowhere do we find, as I'm describing, this tremendous turnabout in 1 week from the morning of Tisha B'Av to the gladness of the 15th of Av a few days later. That is like perfectly summed up in the beautiful Psalm 30, which incidentally,
one of your favorites.
Yes, I have had many occasions to speak about Psalm 30 throughout the years, because indeed it is a song for the inauguration of the temple by David, and it is the song that is sung at the inauguration of the first, second, and, God willing, when the time comes, the third temple. And it is a encyclopedic rendition of the ups and downs of the human experience. And there are things that are expressed here about this dichotomy, about how sometimes I am so low and sometimes I feel high. Like, Hashem, you have raised up my soul from the lower world. You have preserved me from my descent to the pit. And in the evening one lies down weeping, but with dawn a cry of joy. But the bottom line is that I'm thinking about is this verse number 12. And that's what's going on this week. Verse number 12 in Psalms 30 is the epitome of the process that we are now going through. And it declares, you have transformed my lament into dancing for me. You undid my sackcloth and girded me with gladness. That's exactly what is going on this week as we confront the beautiful, unsung, esoteric, enigmatic, misunderstood, beautiful 15th day of the month of Av.
Special day, especially for some people who might have been born on that day.
I would assume somebody must have been born on that day. And I will say that the day before the 15th of Av is also very special to some people. The 14th of Av is the anniversary of the date of Aliyah.
That some people made.
That's your best friend made, yes.
Wow.
This year is on the 14th day of Av, which is Thursday, August 18th, is the 34th anniversary of the momentous decision that my wife and I made, little young kids that we were, to leave it all behind and move to the land of Israel. That's a lifetime. And we never looked back. And that was the greatest thing that we ever did. Yeah. And that's the story with the Tu BAv, and the beauty of it is only accentuated by the fact that this Shabbat we are reading Parshat Ve'etchanan. Parshat Ve'etchanan is the heart, even though it's only the second parsha, in many ways it's the heart of the book of Devarim. Everything that I taught about last week in last week's video lesson about what Deuteronomy is all about is personified, is encapsulated by Parshat V'etchanan. We'll be sharing much of those beautiful, rich ideas in this week's Torah video lesson that will be posted on YouTube, God willing, about Parshat V'etchanan. But I do want to point out that Parshat V'etchanan, second Torah portion of the Book of Numbers, that we will all, no matter where we live, be reading this Shabbat. It begins, and it's so perfect because of this cycle of this week. It opens with a message of the Holy Temple and the existential angst in which this message of the Holy Temple is mentioned is so exquisite for this week. And Yitzchak, of course you know what I'm referring to.
You're referring to I think it's the second verse in this week's Parsha, correct?
I'm referring to, it is actually the third verse.
Third verse, the good mountain.
Where Moshe is reviewing events to the children of Israel and saying, at that time, I implored Hashem, and I said, my Lord, Hashem Elokim, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what power is there in heaven or on the earth that can perform according to your deeds and according to your mighty acts? And still hoping, Moshe hoping against hope that maybe, because of his own intense love affair that he had with the master of the universe, maybe the decree was rescinded. And he said, let me now cross and see the good land that is on the other side of the Jordan, this good mountain and the Lebanon. And as our sages tell us, this is a code, like so many things in the Torah. And Moshe, he only wants one thing in his whole life. The pathos is excruciating. He wants to go into the land of Israel. He says, let me see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, this good mountain and the Lebanon. And as Rashi cites from the words of the sages, the good mountain is an allusion to Jerusalem, and the Lebanon is an allusion to the Holy Temple, because the Holy Temple whitens the sins of the world. It's Levanon. It comes from the root word is white, and it is a whitening agent that whitens everything and lightens everything and brings light into the world. And that, of course, is the whole goal of everything, to come into the land of Israel, build the Holy Temple. That's the mandate of the Jewish people, especially in our generation. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven. With me in the studio, Rabbi Richman. We are from the Temple Institute here in Jerusalem. And today is the 12th day of the month of Av, Menachem Av, 5776, August 16th, 2016. You know, Rabbi, you didn't mention it before, an oversight, but August 16th actually was the day that Elvis Presley died 39 years ago. Whew. I remember it well. Don't ask me why, but I do.
Today is the day?
Today is the day in the Loazi, on the
secular calendar.
Secular calendar, yes.
Gosh. So what a week. Tisha B'Av, Elvis Presley, the day that I moved to Israel, the 15th day of Av, which is someone's birthday. Incredible.
There's a whole lot going on. A whole lot of shaking going on. Anyway.
Did you want to tell our listeners anything about your relationship with Elvis Presley?
No.
Oh, okay.
Don't want to go there.
All right.
However, as you mentioned, this Friday is Tu BAv. And this Shabbat is Parshat V'etchanan, and it's also known as Shabbat Nachamu, because it's the Shabbat of consolation after the wrenching, gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching 3-week period that we've been through. And in fact, beginning on this Shabbat, throughout the next
7 weeks.
7 weeks.
They're actually
leading up to Rosh Hashanah,
7 weeks of consolation.
All the haftarot, all the
prophetic readings.
Prophetic readings that we read in the Beit Knesset in the synagogue after we read from the Torah will be readings of consolation and of good tidings in order to carry us through. Because actually, once we reach Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, really the next Rosh Hashanah is in our sights, and we already begin the transition from today, where we are today, to bringing in the new year, standing before God the King.
I'm glad you said that, best friend, because the truth is the Kabbalists explain on a supernal level, on a spiritual dynamic, that a process begins this week, basically, Tu B'Av, and that is a process of preparation for Rosh Hashanah. This is like now a one solid unit, this time period that we're coming into now. And all of the shifts of consciousness and lights that will bring us into Elul, the time of tremendous spiritual portent, the time when the king is in the field, the time of preparation, the time of closeness. I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me, which is the vestibule through which we enter into the days of awe. That all begins on the 15th day of Av. And on the 15th day of Av, there is a paradigm shift of the light that's reaching this world on a spiritual level. And it begins to turn around, it begins to straighten out, it begins to be injected with hope and joy. And all of that is happening as we speak.
Great day to be born on. Rabbi, I would like clarification on something you said earlier about the different positive things that occurred on Tu B'Av on the 15th. And one, you said that the generation in the desert, that was God decreed that they would all die in the desert, not enter the land. That it was on Tu B'Av that dying ended.
Well,
actually, it was on the 9th of Av.
Yes, not exactly. It's an interesting
Right.
story.
But the people, and again, I guess we got to discuss the details
Do you want me to
of
tell
this.
over the whole thing?
Yeah, of this midrash, that every year on the 9th of Av, which was the day that the spies returned with the evil report about the land, and the people cried, and God said, because you cried for nothing, I'm giving you a reason to cry. And that's when he decreed that generation would not enter the desert, but only 40 years later would their children enter. And so it was on that same day, the 9th of Av, that every year the people, all the men, because it was the men who were involved in
Whoever was going
receiving
to
the evil report.
It is a chilling recounting that our sages tell us, this tradition that, as the decree was made, and nobody died all year round, let's say on May 1st or on July 4th, nobody died. The only time that anyone died during those 40 years was on the 9th of Av, and the entire camp of Israel would dig a grave.
They'd prepare themselves.
They'd prepare themselves, and every man that was included in that decree, meaning from above the age of 20, would go and say goodbye to his family and go to sleep in the grave. And approximately 18,000 people passed away each year. That night, and in the morning, Moshe would pass through the camp and cry out, let the living separate themselves from the dead. And that was the process every year on the 9th of Av.
Now
Came the last year of the decree. You want me to say this, right? Because
Yeah,
it's extremely
absolutely.
Powerful, this idea, for me. Last year came about, and the decree had been fulfilled the previous year. So this year, nobody passed away. Everybody woke up. I kid you not. This is the expression that our sages explain this with. This is what they tell us. They tell us that they were concerned, the people, that maybe they made a mistake in their calculations. Maybe they had the calendar wrong. Maybe they made a mistake. So they continued sleeping in this open grave for another few nights. But when the 15th of Av rolled around and the
moon
was
full,
exactly when the moon was full, there would be no denying
But-
that it's over, because it's a full moon now. It's not like the partial moon of the 9th. So that's when they actually established it as kind of like a festival they knew for sure that it was over and that Hashem's was embracing them, because all the time that that decree was in the world, there was a certain degree of divine anger. But once it was nullified, then it was great joy. But my thing about this whole teaching that I just find so amazing is this hereditary Jewish neurosis / guilt kind of thing, that instead of just being happy, I mean, the sages are actually telling us that their reaction was, oh,
they were spooked.
Maybe we got the date wrong, because we should be dying.
Pinch me, I should be dead.
Right. I'm sorry. Wasn't I supposed to be dead?
Didn't I say goodbye to you yesterday?
So instead of jumping for joy, like that verse that I read in Psalm 30 on the spot, they said, you know what? We better sleep in a grave a few more nights, just to be sure. And that's very telling.
You know, if you transpose that whole idea to the Temple Mount, to the Holy Temple, then I feel like we should be saying, like after the 9th, well, like we filled the Temple Mount with Jews. You know, we're past the period of destruction. We're past the period of, like, let's rejoice now and build. Like, haven't we earned that? Like, God's anger, His wrath has vanished.
Instead, the attitude is, it's never enough mourning. It's just never enough mourning. We have got to sleep in that grave. And I want you to know that teaching, every word, as our listeners know, if our listeners indeed follow these teachings and the Temple Institute's YouTube channel and all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of classes that are available, we always emphasize that the words of our sages are extremely precise, succinct, economical, pithy, and prophetic. And there's no games here. And they're saying something here that they want to make clear to us. And I think this mentality is something that plagues us. This idea that we need to just keep it up, you know, like if there's nobody holding us down in the open grave, we'll just lie there of our own volition, because it can't be that everything's okay. It can't be that God actually is welcoming us. And this is the problem that we face in a contemporary way here, that we're suffering from, that it's time to get up.
Time to get out of the grave of the galut, of the exile.
And there as well.
Embrace the
both
redemption.
in the land and out of the land. You know, say to everybody, sorry, I'm not dead. So you know, see you around. But instead, it's like, well, maybe you want me to be dead? I'm sorry. Should I lie down? Should I play dead? Should I? I know you'd like me to be dead. I'll try to accommodate you.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate.
And you got the saga of the Olympics and not wanting to shake our hand, and you got the BDS, you got everything that we were always confronting all the time about the pariah that Israel is, about the unwelcome country of Israel, and all the terrible, terrible things that we do. And it just goes on and on. All the lies about about what Israel is doing and how Israel is treating the Palestinians, and all the ridiculous lies. And this is what we really need to do. We just need to decide that we are alive and that we don't owe the world that we are in a grave, and get up and start moving. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, the reason the people didn't die that last year was because they were meant to enter the land. That God had a purpose for them, and they had a purpose for God. And you know, God has kept this nation alive and brought us back to the land, not so that we can keep going through the motions of failure, but so that we can push it forward and do what we need to do.
You know, we have a lot of articles that we've written about Tu BAv. I'm sure they'll be posted on our Facebook page in time for the day, where we discuss some of these things in detail. But I want to say that, you know, this whole idea of the cycle of this week, it's so contemporary and relevant to this generation, and it's so beautiful. The whole idea of moving from mourning to the gladness, and of Hashem giving us this, broadcasting us this message that it's time to be joyful, and it's time to build, and it's time to dance, and it's time to realize that we have the opportunity to turn everything around and to turn the lament into joyous song. And the question is, well, does the Jewish people understand that? Are they ready for that? Are they ready for the awesome, weighty responsibility of being happy? Or is that too much to expect, that we could actually just chill out and realize, you know what? God has it covered, and we need to fulfill our destiny. Because the whole idea of the galut, like you said, you know, the inability to perform, the inability to act, the idea of waiting for something to happen, the idea of nostalgizing, romanticizing, perpetuating the mourning, and being afraid to speak up, and being afraid to be Jewish and apologize for what the Torah wants from us, let alone those that are still stuck in the galut. All of it is the aspect of lying in an open grave, just lying there and just trying to be quiet and not get in anybody's way, and just say, okay, I'll just stay here if this is where you want me. So the opposite of Parshat Ve'etchanan, and how beautiful this week's Torah portion is. It's just so incredible. There are so many ideas here that I want to mention, and the verses that are so outstanding. You know, see, I have taught you decrees and ordinances, as Hashem my God has commanded me to do so in the midst of the land. Oh, not in Westchester County, not in the 5 towns. To do so in the midst of the land to which you come to possess it. You shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the peoples who shall hear all the. It is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the peoples. What? You're not supposed to apologize for having an archaic, dogmatic religion? No. It is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the people who shall hear all these decrees, and who shall say, surely a wise and discerning people is this great nation. For which is a great nation that has a God who is close to it, as is Hashem our God, whenever we call to him. What about all those Christian leaders who says that God doesn't hear the prayer of a Jew? It says here, Moshe says that Hashem hears whenever we call to him. Oh man, it is just absolutely incredible. What did you want to say, Yitzchak? I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, it was a good thing you interrupted, because I had a thought which completely vanished as soon as I opened my mouth a minute ago. But again, it's the commandments are our wisdom. That's how the nations perceive it. That's what the verse says, correct? The nations perceive our wisdom
and discernment
as being from the commandments. So obviously, we are judged by the nations in accordance with our performance of the commandments, and in accordance to how closely we walk the walk and adhere to God. And of course, that is what we're always talking about when we're talking about building the Holy Temple. That far from being, you know, a slap in the face in the world order and some kind of, you know, trashing of humanity, God forbid, that this really is what is expected of us, not simply by God, not simply by our covenant with God, but also from the nations who observe from outside. This is what they expect. This is what they read their Bible, and this is what they expect of us. And we are delinquents at our own risk if we do not take this very seriously and pursue it very actively.
There's a certain theme that I really want to develop in detail in this week's Torah video, so I want to restrain myself and not say too much now in this medium, because I want to go into that, but I want to mention this in the meantime. You know, there is a special message here of, it's a foreboding of exile, and it's a promise of return. And in chapter 4, beginning in verse 25, it starts talking about angering Hashem, and he says, I point heaven and earth this day to bear witness against you that you will surely perish quickly from the land to which you are crossing the Jordan, and Hashem is going to scatter you, and there you'll serve other gods. And then verse 29 picks it up and says, from there, from the places that you have been flung into, you will seek Hashem your God, and you will find him, if you search for him with all your heart and all your soul. So first of all, I'm being told that the only way to find Hashem is really to put yourself into it, right? All your heart and all your soul. When you are in distress and all these things have befallen you at the end of days, you will return unto Hashem your God and hearken to his voice. For Hashem your God is a merciful God. He will not abandon you or destroy you, and he will not forget the covenant of your forefathers that he swore to them. For inquire now regarding the early days that preceded you, from the day when God created man on the earth, and from one end of heaven to the other end of heaven. And I think this is one of the most profound series of verses in the Torah. Has there ever been anything like this great thing? Or has anything like it been heard? Has a people ever heard the voice of God speaking from the midst of the fire as you have heard and survived? Or has any God ever miraculously come to take for himself a nation from amidst a nation, with challenges, with signs, and with wonders, and with war, and with a strong hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with greatly awesome deeds, such as everything that Hashem your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? You have been shown in order to know that Hashem, he is God. There is none beside him. That's like the whole thing, basically. I got nothing to add.
And it says, true today, as it was then, true today, almost 4,000 years later, that the miracles God has performed for his people remain quite unique.
So according to this, everything is on schedule, pretty serious, pretty promised, pretty clear, pretty preordained, pretty destiny fulfilling, and that's why we are attempting to establish, to strengthen, to advance the world's first and only academy for training Kohanim, so that the men that have to serve in the Holy Temple will be completely prepared in every way. That's why we are asking everyone to participate in our current Indiegogo campaign for raising the funds needed to really get this school, which has already been established 4 years ago and is operating on a smaller scale, to really get it going. And
we've raised 15% of our goal so far in our campaign, which will continue up right to Rosh Hashanah. So,
and I'm hoping that those that are spiritually motivated and minded, and who really understand the significance of what we're trying to do and what Hashem is asking of us, will want to take part in such a tremendous privilege.
Again, just as a recap, we have the manpower because the sons and descendants of Aaron, the first high priest, the first Kohen Gadol, are around. Like, they've been through every generation. Families have kept very, very precise track of their genealogy, and a Kohen knows he's a Kohen because his father's a Kohen and his grandfather was a Kohen, and so we have the manpower, and we have the knowledge, and now it's just a matter of empowering and enabling the people, the Kohanim, the priests, temple priests who live in our midst today, empowering them through giving them practical knowledge of what their responsibilities, what their duties are in the Holy Temple. And that seems like almost like a no-brainer. I mean, why wasn't it done before? But again, it really is the first school to teach the practical application of these commandments, and to ready and prepare Kohanim today, so that the minute a mizbech, the minute an altar is set up in its precise place on the Temple Mount, they'll be able to step in and to perform the offerings.
Yitzchak.
Yeah.
Your best friend's birthday is Tu B'Av. Have you thought about what you're going to get him?
Yeah, I really am thinking gotta get him something special. Any suggestions?
I don't know, maybe you want to share with the listeners.
But you know what? You know our address. Anybody has any suggestions of what I could get my best friend for his birthday, which is Tu BAv, this Friday, then I could use those suggestions right about now.
He's getting pretty old, though. At his age, I don't even think people celebrate birthdays anymore.
Well, I think we need to celebrate this one. How old is this friend going to be? 100? 120? Not yet.
Feels like it. This week.
Yeah, well, it's all going to be good, Rabbi.
Happy Tu BAv to the whole world.
We're going to change all that sadness into
gladness.
Joy. This Friday, Tu BAv. And thank you for being with us on this week's edition of Temple Talk. We'll be back next week, Temple Talk.
God willing.